Müslümanlar ev almak için kredi çekebilirler mi?
In Canada, we deal with this question a lot, and of course, I don't know how things work here in Istanbul and in Turkey more generally, and I can only speak about my Canadian experience. So, in Canada, why does it become a question? It becomes a question because, of course, it's a non-Muslim environment, and the banking system is there. Typically, if somebody needs a loan to buy a house or to buy a car or even to get advanced education, one would get a loan from the bank. And in fact, in terms of advanced education, the government offers loans, and that loan would be repaid at a minimal interest, but still there is some interest. And of course, for Muslims, riba is haram. And if riba is haram, how can we get a loan to buy a house or to buy even a car? So this becomes a question. Now, of course, Muslims have over time established some organizations and institutions that will lend money to Muslims on a Sharia-compliant basis. And on this basis, Muslims can buy a house using this Sharia-compliant system. And typically, the arrangement was that, and still is, that lender of the money will not be giving it as a loan, but would be in partnership with the homeowner. So I want to buy a house, I go to one of these institutions, they front the money for me to buy a house, I put a part myself, and so we are co-owners in the home. And so let's say we're 50-50. So now I will be paying a rent for the part that is owned by the financier. As over time, I'm saving part of the rent, because instead of renting a house for, let's say, $2,000 without buying, then by putting half of the money to buy this house that I'm going to live in, instead of paying $2,000 rent, now I only have to pay $1,000 rent, because I only have to pay half of the rent, the half that is owned by the financier. And as for the other $1,000 that basically I'm saving now on a monthly basis, I don't have to fork out another $1,000 every month. Then I can use that $1,000 in my hand to buy off part of the ownership of the financier, so that over time I own the complete house and the financier does not own any. Now, this looks like a good arrangement, and it has worked for many people. Many Muslims have found satisfaction in this, because they know that at the end of the day they don't have any doubt, nothing to answer for on Yawm al-Qiyamah. They are fair and square with God. However, some others look at this and they see that there are some inequities built into the system. First of all, many have observed that if they were to go with the conventional bank, then they would pay less overall than they were paying at, using this Sharia-compliant system. Now, the details of why that works out to this discrepancy, paying more for the Sharia-compliant system, this does not need to detain us now, but that has been the experience of people over time. So the question keeps coming back. Another reason the question keeps coming back is the Sharia-compliant institutions cannot absorb and deal with the high demand from Muslims to buy homes. And so many Muslims are forced by necessity to go to the banking system anyway. And so they request a fatwa about this. Now, the European Fatwa Council deals with issues that face minorities in Europe, in America, in Australia, and of course, by extension, in Canada as well. And they have dealt with this question. So what they have said is that a Muslim could, if they do not have better alternatives, they could buy a house using the traditional, or rather the conventional banking system, which means that they will be paying interest. But this is only for the house that they're going to live in, not as an investment that they're going to rent out to somebody else. And this is if they do not have better alternatives, and if they really need that. For example, if they want to live close to the mosque, they want to live close to where their children will go to an Islamic school, something of this nature. So they give some kind of caveats and some cautions and so on, without saying outright that this is, okay now. However, their argument about why this could be done is interesting because it can lead us to further thinking about this. One is that they say this is not necessity. It is admitted that one can go through one's whole life renting and one doesn't have to own, and so it's not necessity, it's not darura, to use the Arabic term. But they said that it is a need, and to use the Arabic term, it is a haja of Muslims, and naturally to have home ownership, this is a human need. It's an instinctive need. Moreover, there is a practical consideration that if, for example, in Canada, Muslims own property, then they're seen to be part of the landscape, like they own. This is my home. I've planted my flag right here. This is my land. But if they are just simply renting it, both psychologically, both for them and for the rest of Canada, it looks like Muslims are only here temporarily. They're here today, they could be gone tomorrow. So the sense of ownership and possession is not only limited to the home, it is extended by home ownership to a part of the land, like we own land in Canada. This is our country. It makes a lot of difference psychologically, both for the Muslims and the way in which others will perceive Muslims who are living there as minorities in Canada. So definitely it is a need that that resonates with me. The second consideration about this is that they say that in the Quran, what is being condemned a lot is the taking of interest. It's the one who is taking the interest that is being condemned in the Quran, not the one who is giving the interest. Only once in the Quran, the one who is giving the interest is spoken about, but there the person is not condemned. There is a contrast being drawn between giving, giving charity on the one hand and taking a loan on interest on the other hand, because taking a loan on the interest means you're paying out but you're not getting anything back, and giving in charity means that you're giving and investing in the life hereafter. So that's the Quran's point. But it's not saying that giving interest is haram. It's just saying what you give in interest doesn't really come back to you, whereas the charity remains for you forever. So there's a distinction there. But when the Quran is condemning interest, for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, La ta'kulu riba. In Surah Al Imran, La ta'kulu riba ad'afan mud'afa. Do not take interest double and multiplied. So this is obviously about a compound type of interest. In Surah Baqarah, if I return to that for the moment, Alladhina yakuluna riba. Those who eat interest. So you can see the terminology is those who are taking the interest, filling their bellies with it. It is those who are taking the interest doubled and multiplied. These are the people who are condemned in the Quran. It's not the one who is giving the interest. And in Surah Al-Baqarah, they are warned, if you do not stop taking interest, then will be harbi min Allahi wa rasuli. Then take a warning of a war from God and His Messenger. So why this warning? It is because God is coming in on the side of the oppressed to defend the oppressed people against the oppressor. So you can see the dynamic here. It was to stave off oppression because usury, in high levels of interest and compound interest, was used in past societies to control people. The rich dominated the poor. When they lent them money, they had these high amounts of interest. Poor could not pay them back, and the poor then became slaves of the lenders. So the Quran is defending the oppressed people against the oppressors, and that's what the interest prohibition was about. That's what riba was really about. So the European Fatwa Council says that while the Quran does not prohibit one from actually giving interest, we should nevertheless avoid it. And of course there's a hadith, as we know, that says that there are 5 condemned with regards to interest: the one who gives it, the one who takes it, the one who writes the contract, and the 2 witnesses. So we don't want anything to do with interest at all. We don't want to witness the contract, we don't want to write it down for anybody, and so on. We have nothing to do with it. We don't want to even give interest because it's haram for the other person to take it, and we don't want to be contributing to him taking the haram. However, in situations where Muslims are driven by need, we can differentiate between the two. Like if somebody puts a gun to my head and says, give me your money, well, I'll give them my money. It's haram for him to take my money, but it's not haram for me to give him my money. In fact, it might be, under the circumstances, the best thing to do, because it's necessary for me to preserve my own life. And in this situation, instead of letting him blow my brains out, I just give him my money and we can deal with the injustice later on and catch the culprit later on. So with all of these considerations in mind, it looks like the Fatwa Council's, the European Fatwa Council's fatwa on this question is a reasonable one. But we can take it a step further and realize that in fact, and they argued this as well, that in giving interest, in fact, you are contributing to a state of affairs for the Muslims which cannot be a long-term state of affairs. If one or two persons say, you know, I fear Allah so much, I want nothing to do with interest, I'll just rent all my life, or I'll wait for the Sharia-compliant opportunity, even if I pay more, I prefer that, I have no questions to answer on the Day of Judgment, well then, that's the person's choice. But we cannot prescribe this as a choice for all Muslims in general, because in that case, it would mean that Muslims are renting a property which were actually bought on interest. So typically a non-Muslim landlord would buy a house on interest and then rent it to Muslims. And then the Muslim will be paying rent. The non-Muslim landlord will be using that rent money to pay off the mortgage on the house. And then in the end, it's the non-Muslim landlord who owns the house which was paid for, literally, with the money of the Muslim tenant. And in the end, the non-Muslim landlord can say to the tenant, you know what, I need this house for my own personal use, or I want to do some renovations, or whatever excuse, they can discontinue the lease with or refuse to renew the lease for the Muslim tenant. And then in the end, what happens? The Muslim tenant is now on the street, and his money that he's been paying over the years has paid off for the house, which is now owned by the non-Muslim landlord. So this state of affairs cannot be a long-term solution for Muslims. And so with this, all of these considerations in mind, I feel that it is best that we loosen up that tight regulation from the past, and we say that given the present circumstances that we face in Canada, it is allowable for Muslims to use the conventional banking mortgage system to own the house that they're going to live in. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, and may He forgive us for our errors and our mistakes. Thank you for watching. This is your brother in faith, Shabir Ally, speaking to you from the Science, Philosophy, Religion Foundation in Turkey. Peace be with you, and the mercy and blessings of Allah. Assalamu alaikum.